Hello from Becky and me. Welcome to this evening's programme.
First tonight, how safe is the future of your fire service?
With a national spending review just days away, some of our county brigades are already facing up to the reality of cuts in frontline services.
Union leaders today warned services could be compromised, and it only looks set to get worse, as Malcolm Robertson reports.
Today the region's fire service is under the microscope as never before. Every aspect of it analysed for possible savings. Will these make our county safer? According to firefighters at a rally in Norwich today, Norfolk won't be. They're protesting over plans to reduce the number of fire engines in the Norwich area with a loss of 24 jobs.
But every service is going to have to make cuts. That's just a sad fact of life.
Well, it's interesting that David Cameron, before the election, said very clearly he was going to protect frontline services. You don't get more frontline than the fire and rescue service.
Firefighters across East Anglia are worried this is just part of what's likely to be a major overhaul of the fire service. A long-running dispute over cuts in Essex resumed last month. The fire service is also planning to spend £20 million expanding its headquarters in Kelvedon. This is surely a sign of things to come. Firefighters today, but over the next few months we're likely to see many more demonstrations with the prospect of thousands of people in our region losing their jobs because of public spending cuts. The reason the fire service could take a real hit is because government figures suggest the number of call-outs is dropping. Fire services attended almost 250,000 in England last year, 3% down on the previous year and down by a third on 10 years ago. The number of people who died in fires was 328, slightly higher than the previous year, but down on a decade ago. And the number of other incidents also dropped. Most of these were to road accidents or flooding. What irks a lot of people within the fire service is that at a time of financial constraints, the new regional control centre at Waterbeach near Cambridge lies empty, along with 8 others around the country, costing a total of £300 million. They've been delayed by computer software problems. The government may eventually pull the plug on them. Last month, Bedfordshire and Luton Fire Service said it couldn't wait any longer for the proposed new regional centre and was spending £200,000 on new computers for its own call centre.
We do have to move forward and deal with what we've got, and there does seem to have been this top-down approach that didn't necessarily use local common sense that led to some of the problems we're now having, and this is a really good example of that.
In Norfolk, today's protest fell on deaf ears. Firefighters went to the County Council's Cabinet meeting hoping to hear that the proposed cuts would be overturned, to no avail. The decision will almost certainly be ratified by the full council next month, with the likelihood of further cuts following the government spending review.
I'm afraid at the moment we can't rule anything out or in, but all we can promise is we'll look at everywhere in the service before we start looking at fire stations to see if we can tease out any of the savings there, and then we'll have to make a decision, and the council will have to make a decision of what their fire and rescue service needs to look like for the next 5 or 10 years.
No fire cuts!
This may be typical of the sort of resentment we'll see in lots of sectors in the months ahead. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News.
Well, Malcolm joins us now from Bethel Street Station in Norwich, which is one of those under threat. Malcolm, I presume we're going to see more of this across the entire region, are we?
Well, there's industrial action in Essex, and as we saw in that report, there's also disquiet here in Norfolk. Now, this is very much a local issue, the closure of Bethel Street, which is the main fire station in Norwich, transferring to one on the outskirts of the city. What it means is the loss of one of the main fire engines and the loss of 24 jobs. Now, the County Council says that they hope that those losses can be absorbed by natural wastage. But if we are to get public service cuts of anything between 25 and 40%, the fire service will undoubtedly take a hit. So yes, I think there will be more protests involving firefighters, but not just firefighters. I think public service workers across the board.
Malcolm, if services are cut back, do you think people notice any difference?
I think that depends on the scale of the cuts. Now, clearly there's disagreement between local authorities and the Fire Brigades Union over figures, the number of call-outs, and clearly a great deal of work has been undertaken in terms of fire prevention. But if we are to get those big cuts, the fire service won't be immune, so I think you could well see possibly the closure of rural fire stations. So yes, I think the public could well see changes, yes.
All right, Malcolm, thank you very much for that. Well, those cuts to the fire service are among many we've already heard about, and they certainly won't be the last.
We're just over a week away from the government's major spending review, and Anglia Tonight has been looking at how the region is set for the shake-up ahead.
David Hughes is with us now. David, we've been looking at how the region's been getting on economically. How have we actually done that then?
Well, over the next few weeks, on every Tuesday for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at this whole issue, perhaps taking the economic temperature of the region, I suppose. And to do that, we've teamed up with independent economists, Cambridge Econometrics. Of course, we all know cuts are on the way. It's a question of how deep, and will some areas of the region actually be hit harder than others? So to answer that question, Cambridge Econometrics have been cutting through a vast array of data, doing an awful lot of number crunching. So we've called our series over the next few weeks, the Anglia Number Crunch. So, along with Cambridge Econometrics, we looked at every local council area in the Anglia region and came up with two measures. A vulnerability index, how hard an area might be hit by cuts or another downturn, and on the other side of the coin, adaptability, how well a given area can cope with the changes ahead. And we crunched the numbers together and came up with a plot which took into account both the vulnerability and the adaptability. A graph with 4 chunks, if you like. Now, places in this corner of the graph, well, they may well be more vulnerable, but they're also very adaptable. Now, over here in the top corner, well, they might not be very adaptable, but they are also the least vulnerable. Now, the best place to be on this graph is here, the least vulnerable and the most adaptable. Where you don't want to be is down in this corner, the most vulnerable places with the lowest ability to adapt. We number crunched a whole range of data, like the number of public sector jobs, unemployment, what the average wage is in each area, new business startups, educational achievement, and things like the number of jobs in high-tech industries. And tomorrow we'll be finding out where you live fits into that overall picture, into that graph we just saw. Is it vulnerable in the tough times ahead, or could it be well placed to adapt? I've actually got the results hot off the press from Cambridge Econometrics. We'll be looking at them in a bit more detail. We've got a special programme tomorrow from Essex University, including the results of an exclusive opinion poll that asks people in this region what they think about the cuts and how deep they should go. Brilliant.
Thank you, David. Look forward to that. Inquests have finally begun into the deaths of those killed in the July 7th bombings more than 5 years ago.
52 people, including 9 from our region, died when 4 al-Qaeda-backed terrorists detonated bombs on 3 underground trains and a bus in London.
Relatives of many of the victims were among those attending the hearing in the capital. A few minutes ago, we spoke to our correspondent Matthew Hudson, who's in central London. I started by asking him what the inquest hoped to establish.
Well, the inquest is due to last for 5 months, and it'll be looking in detail at the plot that led to the 7/7 atrocities. But it'll also be looking at how well the emergency services coped with what they were left to deal with, and also whether there was anything the security services could have done to prevent these attacks. Now, that's a pretty crucial question, because the families of a lot of the victims believe that the security services have been dragging their feet over this, reluctant to help out this inquest, and trying to ensure that as much of the evidence is heard in private as possible. Having said that, though, the coroner, who is Lady Justice Hallett, she's publicly said that she wants as much of it to be heard in public court as possible. Now, on 7/7, 9 of the victims who died were from our region. They came from places like Norwich and Ipswich, Luton and Harlow, and it'll be 5 months before we get any kind of verdict into exactly how and why they died.
Matt, it seems a long time coming. Why do you think it's taken so long for the inquest to get underway?
Well, quite apart from the sheer scale of the evidence that has to be considered, the court was waiting for trials of 3 men accused of assisting the bombers to be concluded. They have now been concluded. One of the bombers, of course, Jermaine Lindsay, he came from Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire, and there is, of course, that chilling CCTV footage of him meeting up with the other 3 bombers at Luton before they travelled down to London, where they killed themselves and 52 other people.
Matt, thanks very much.
The pop